Hello, just a further thing to talk about on the subject of ethics and diabolism, or what I was terming the kind of like the substrate of ethics and diabolism. This is in my view, of course, and you'll see that I depart from uh, the kind of ways of thinking of a lot of other people who think of themselves as devil worshippers. Now, um, one thing which uh, always comes up, I think, when people are talking about ethical issues, um, one way or another, is the sense of evil, and the sense of good and evil. Yeah. Um, Crowley, I can remember reading as saying words to the effect that though good and evil uh, could be shown to really be relative and and not real in absolute black and white divided off terms that you can define in this way. Um, Although he considered that to be so, he also considered it to be objectively degrading to act as if that were so, if you see what I mean. To act as if there were no such thing as good and evil. And I think that shows that we are dealing with very deep psychological issues when we talk about this, not just some sort of abstract philosophical thing about is there a good and is there an evil, and is it constant, and etc., etc., this sort of thing. The term evil, it's not something which is, in many, many senses, it's not a useful term because it's highly emotional. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways in which the terms like evil are not helpful. Yeah. Uh, However, this is a psychological reality. Yeah. And people can pretend that it's not, but it is. And I think you could say it's a psycho-spiritual reality. Yeah. Because of how profound it is. And so what I find myself looking at is, well, what does that come down to? I mean, evil is something which people viscerally, instinctively, and with an absolutist response reject as being something that they feel threatened by. So they feel great fear for something, and it's seen as being something which is almost seen as being intent upon destruction. So there is something very, very awful about this sense of it. Yeah. And we can see that in people. Certainly we can see this in people, people who are just intent on destructiveness. Yeah. And of course these people are quite rightly reviled by other people because they bring nothing but suffering. So unless you have some sort of a value system which loves to suffer, then no, this isn't this isn't obviously something which is to be tolerated, really, because it's awful. It's just awful for people. It causes absolute misery. Yeah. So no, there's no way anybody reasonably would would accommodate that. Um, but there are things which I think we can look at. However, there are things which we can look at. Excuse me. There are things which we can look at in terms of our consciousness and our lives and our existence. Yeah. And two things that I could say here: simply by being, by existing, we have already rejected non-existence at some very profound level. Our very existence is a rejection of non-existence. We can't even imagine what non-existence is. We can imagine kind of like, well, okay, I know, I know, here's this cushion, yeah? Now, I can imagine the cushion not being there, yeah? But can I imagine the non-existence of that cushion? Well, I mean, I'm thinking about the cushion in order to imagine its non-existence, if you see what I mean. So the non-existence of the cushion is the cushion-shaped space, basically. That's obviously not non-existence. Yeah, we cannot even comprehend non-existence. Yeah, and that very thing. So it is an absolute unknown. It's an unknown which is unintegratable and not in any sense assimilatable. Yeah, we can't assimilate it into our sense of order, of reality, of anything. Yeah, so that will be non-existence, and we are the kind of embodied rejection of that. We are the embodied um, contrary to that. Yeah, by simply existing. Another thing would be that we simply all the time we are making sense of the world in some sense. Yeah, all the time we are wired to make sense of the world, to interpret the world, to make it make sense in some way or another. Yeah, that's part of it. But what this means is that simply by being, we rub up against non existence. Simply by functioning in consciousness, we come that close to total incoherence. That is something that we that is something that we reject. Those things we reject so that we can be and so that we can function. The confusion that people get into, I think, is that our lives are based on a rejection. Our lives are based on a negation. We negate non-existence in order to exist, and we negate incoherence in order to make sense of things. But these are positive, creative negations, if you see what I mean. They have nothing to do with non-existence. Now, what can happen with people, though, is that they can confuse things, and the very act of negation which allows us to exist can be confused with non-existence itself, which is a fatal flaw and a fatal mistake. This is a kind of ontological attempted suicide. Yeah, and although this may sound very abstruse and abstract, if it makes any sense at all, uh, I think these things underlie a great deal of dysfunction in people. They underlie a great deal of dysfunction. Yeah, because there is no body, no thing alive that is on the side of non-existence. Yes, in this respect. So, is it possible as a diabolist to have a sense of evil? Well, it depends how you look at it. You see, it's an absolute essential in many ways to negate non-existence and to negate incoherence, because these things allow us to live and to function and to thrive. And so you see, our rejection of these things, and in a sense our fighting against these things at times, certainly, this is part and parcel of our will to live. It's part and parcel of our lust for life. And so these things, in some essential, visceral, and instinctive, but also philosophical sense, are goods. And the very opposite of them, the thing that we must deny in order for these things to be, we can give it whatever name we like, but it can take the place of something that other people call evil, however you want to put it. And these things are I think, complex and complicated, but it's the sort of thing that I think about. Doesn't mean that I've got this all all sorted out or figured out or correct. Yeah, But these are just how my thoughts go about these things. Um, so I hope that's of some interest. I hope that's maybe fruitful for people to think about, and hopefully to improve upon. But it's the sort of stuff I think about. I think these things do have a relationship to ethics, yeah, because they point out that certain things are massively destructive, and and attempted ontological suicide is about as near as I can get to the very opposite of ethics. And what you deny, what you deny is important. Yeah. Remember, in the Egyptian depictions, when the solar bark goes underneath the earth and it has to face the demon Apep, it is Set that destroys it. It is Set, well, he can't destroy it, this is never destroyed. It is Set that defeats it every time so that the sun may continue to rise. It's Set. And Set and Apep are not the same thing. Now, the fact that Set has that negating power is very important. The fact that he's the one who can do it is important. And I think those are things that are worth thinking about. But this is something I do like to think about, and I think it's very, very important, because otherwise you can get into real problems with this sort of stuff. Yeah, as I've indicated, I hope. Okay, thank you very much for listening.